Hi, welcome to the first panel discussion of Asiata Digital Labs AI Summit. So this panel discussion will be trying to discuss about how we can leverage on multi-cloud and also hybrid cloud environments for artificial intelligence long-range plans. To give a little bit of a background to what we're going to discuss, if you take 10 years ago, so we were planning everything on what we can do with the big data and the huge data we used to have, how we could leverage on this data to start making applications related to machine learning as well as data science. Now we have come to a point where we start, we need to bring this edge, these machine learning and data science applications to start working on the artificial intelligence applications and also its development, deployments, and we can no longer rely on our on-prem architecture. We need to start looking into other options available to make it how we can make it more scalable and make it more reliable and bring it to the next level of the industry revolution 4.0 where we are at the midst. So thank you Romain, Dave and Neo and also Geoff for joining this panel discussion. I would like to first direct the question to Romain. So Romain, shall we discuss a little bit about what are the sort of multi-cloud and also hybrid cloud architectures we could observe right now?
Yes, sure. And good morning, Buddhika. So when we talk about multi-cloud today, basically we talk about a combination of public clouds, there's multiple of them, potentially on-prem cloud, private cloud, which I would say it's not completely gone. And I would probably extend the definition nowadays of multi-cloud to also edge clouds, right? So nowadays when we talk about multi-cloud, what we need to keep in mind, it's private on-prem, private cloud, public clouds, and edge cloud as an extension, right? So when we look actually at all those options that are available and why people should look into multi-cloud, actually there's multiple factors. And I would say it goes beyond just AI, right? AI is one of the use cases that really needs nowadays multi-cloud, but not only. And usually those factors are fairly simple. The first one is I want to be able to run my apps on many regions that maybe just one single provider can offer, right? I want to be able to use differentiated services, right, that one provider can offer. And we have seen through the different workshops and keynotes that there is a lot of very good services out there on public cloud. So I want to be able to use many of them, not just one, right? And ultimately, and I think it goes beyond just technicals, right? But the ability to relocate workloads based on business strategy. Because at the end of the day, the business strategy dictates where you run your workloads. When we talk about AI specifically, there is two main workloads to consider. The first one is training, and the second one is inference of AI, right? And they both have different requirements, and they might run on one or other platforms. When you look at training, the main factors that you will be looking at, and I think during the Snowflake presentation it was highlighted as well, running your training where the data is. Data gravity is a key thing. You don't want to move data around, right? It increases cost and it's a security risk. But also, which tools and services do you want to use to do my training? And ultimately, we are also talking, because that's important, infrastructure TCO, right? Cloud has been so far proven very effective at running quick experiments. You want to run a test, it's easier to go to a cloud platform to start with, instead of asking your IT department to build the infrastructure that you need. But ultimately, when you keep going and developing more product and you train more and more regularly, the TCO change, right? That's why having both options available anytime is more relevant. Now, when it comes to inferencing, which is the use of AI, we have seen again that there is factors, but they're slightly different from the one from training. First is the latency, where my new data is coming from. If it's batch processing, it was discussed, Maybe it's in the data center and does not need to be in a cloud. But maybe it's new data coming from apps or from cloud services. Maybe this is where you want your inferencing to run. So at the end of the day, what matters when you look at your multi-cloud strategy is understand you want to be able to move your workloads anytime, anywhere, from technical but also business perspective. And people need to also know that today it is very easy to leverage multi-cloud because adoption of cloud platforms has driven providers to offer connectivity, almost seamless connectivity between the clouds, whether it's public, private, or edge.
Yeah, thank you so much, Romain, for that. To give us a very good starting for this panel discussion. That baseline is very clear. So if you start looking into the companies, majority of the companies who are actually holding big data right now, so they almost everyone is trying to move their on-prem data applications and everything into the cloud solutions and cloud services. Some of are already available public cloud solutions. Some are trying to move into a single cloud solution, and some are trying to move into multiple cloud solutions. At the same time, they are in a sort of a intermediate position where they are operating in a hybrid environment where some of their data is in on-prem and also some of their data in the cloud. So I would like to put this question to Dave. We have this gentleman from Microsoft. Hi, Dave. So what do you think the right strategy to move on-prem AI and machine learning applications into to the cloud? So can you give us a couple of insights on this? Thanks.
Sure, thank you. So as Romain said, it has to be based on business value and business justifications. Yeah. So even though I come from one of the major cloud providers, you shouldn't just move things to the cloud just because. There needs to be very valid reasons for that. But then if you are deciding to move, you've done your TCO and you've picked some workloads to move, then it's like any other cloud migration. You got to go through your, what we call the 6 Rs, and you got to evaluate your applications today and go, am I going to rehost this? Am I going to retire this? Am I going to replace this? I would caution against just going and what we call lift and shift or rehosting. It's very tempting to do because it can get you into the cloud quickly. But today, the most expensive workloads are running virtual machines in the cloud. And there is a lot of scalability and other benefits that you can get from a TCO perspective by looking at some of the higher level services in the machine learning and AI space. The other factor is, of course, that you need to take into consideration is security and governance. If you're actually going to productionize and become a cognitive organization and productionize artificial intelligence workloads in the cloud, then it's not just, you're not dabbling, right? You need to actually set up proper governance. You need to set up proper landing zone. You need to make sure that you have your racing matrix in place, just like any sort of cloud migration. You need to understand, how are we going to handle data leakage? How are we going to handle privacy? How are we going to protect data from our customers, from data scientists and data engineers, and all sorts of these governance considerations. And then finally, from the inference perspective, just like Ronan talked about, there may be some advantages to training data in the cloud due to the scalable compute, but some of the inference you still may want to run back on-prem for compliance reasons, for latency reasons, and so forth. So just mapping out those requirements against the business drivers for this AI application is critical.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dave. So let me move ahead of this discussion and let's try to discuss a little bit about more about the data engineering perspectives, application development perspectives. Also, we have DevOps in software industry. Also, now the MLOps is quite famous. Now it's coming to the artificial intelligence, and AI ops going to be going to play a huge part in this, right? So I would like to put this question to Geoff. So Geoff, can you give us a couple of challenges where you would observe when it comes to data engineering, application development, deployment, as well as data warehousing? in these like multi-cloud environments?
Yeah, look, I think there's a number of dimensions to the challenge. And when you fundamentally look at data engineering, data warehousing, and the ability to train and execute ML and AI models, the one thing that we consistently hear is just these struggles with accessing the data and making it readily available. And when you look at, I think, as Romain and Dave mentioned, these hybrid environments, I think that every organization that Axiata Digital Labs would serve has all these silos and bunkers of data. You may have some OSS or BSS data on-prem. You've got your CDR data. Most of your marketing teams may be using SaaS products like Google Analytics to understand how your users are interacting with you through your website. Your Salesforce may actually be using a Salesforce.com. So the fact that when we create these hybrid infrastructures and we have data both on-prem, in public cloud infrastructure buckets, as well as in SaaS applications, that's one of the reoccurring themes that we hear about being able to develop, effective and consistent data engineering, data warehousing approaches, being able to actually just get the pool of data that you need to be able to create effective models and to execute them. So I think that's one aspect of things. Really, this hybrid environment has created complexities in the pipelines that we need to create. The second thing is, speaking with many customers, to really get that competitive advantage, most organizations have realized that they need to look beyond the four walls of their organization. So it's not only about the data that you actually have within an opco or within your organization, it's how can they leverage data in my business partners. So almost most telcos will have some sort of relationship with a payment provider, so you can actually do billing. Above and beyond that, to really start to create some new interesting products, you may need to leverage third-party data. So you may need some socio-economical data. You may need some, real estate price data. You may need weather data. And once again, I think all these disciplines are really struggling to create these effective pipelines with the realization that you need first, second, and third-party data to really drive an effective AI ML program.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot for that insight. I think you were talking about like things like ROS EDR and all. How are we going to put this data into like a public cloud services? I think I have another question ready for you, like coming later, to discuss a little bit about like data governance and stuff. Like so, in this like cold data records and all, we may probably have like sensitive data like customer numbers, like and their personal details and stuff. Like so let's discuss a little bit further on that during that question. And now I'd like to move this discussion towards a little bit like to telco specific question. So I have Neo here from Huawei. So one of the things we observe in telecommunication industry is especially the operators. So most of the matured operators been like operating for like 10-15 years now. So if you look at their like technology history of technology development, they've been evolving for like over a period of time. And if you see like the network itself, it's like have access network, core network, transportation network, and BSS, OSS operations, and all these things, and IT operations and big data platforms in they also there. So if you look at this entire picture, like there's an enormous number of like vendor specific applications, vendor specific small public private clouds, small data centers. So I would like to put this question to you, like how important it would be have like open architectures in this artificial intelligence long range plans, and also what sort of synergies do you expect the operators and also the vendor to have, and we have the public cloud services. So can you put a little bit of a shed of a light here?
Thank you. Well, actually, adoptions of the open architecture is always a focus topic, for governments, for large enterprises, and of course the telco operators.
Yeah.
Now, adoptions of open architecture basically will ensure, standardizations and also help in interoperability between different, platform, different products. And when your platform is open, right, you minimize some of the vendor login risks. So these are some of the things why it is important if we move to open architecture. The other one, I think, when you talk about open architecture, you always talk about, open source, right? So compliance to the industry standard, to the open standards, this is actually come, as an important factor also. Now, in terms of synergies, right, as for synergy expected, especially for the telco operator technology stacks, I think just like you mentioned quite a few, right, OSS, BSS. So telco business, in fact, is very complex, and you're using different IT technology stacks needed to address different business needs, right? So some of these core business that, as I can think of, is like the back-end telco network management, right? How to optimize the network, OSS, BSS, operation support, and how to do the billing support system. And the other aspect is also customer experience management, churn management, and of course there are a lot of other areas, right? So AI can actually help telco in customer behavior analysis, right? Because telco do have a lot of these mobile devices data, right? And this one you can actually do the behavior analysis, like looking at the spending patterns, looking at the web access patterns, how they basically make use of the mobile. Is the mobile network, the signal stable? What is the density, of population needs? And then using all this data, right, using AI, you are able to use it to help you to better improve the services, right? And of course, the other aspect is the churn analysis. So, if for a particular certain areas where you realize that there's a lot of call drops, statistics, and you must actually take actions from telco perspective to improve it. If not, you will expect, certain churn to be, higher, for that particular area. And now the other thing is cloud can provide telco the agile IT infrastructure with AI platform to dynamically meet the telco operation needs, and support telcos to B and to C businesses. So at a high level, I think in terms of synergy, I can see three areas cloud and AI can help a telco. First is able to support telco internal IT modernization. So just like I mentioned about network optimization or that. Second is for telcos to perform digital transformations for traditional industry. So I think telcos sometimes your to-B business, you venture into things like logistics, all that. AI can really help a lot, in terms of optimizing some of the routes, this and that. And third is to support the telco to explore future digital native business expansion. Be it working with the startups, be it working with some enterprises, to explore some of these digital native businesses is actually another area. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. So basically, like, as we see, like, we just finished our hackathon yesterday. So everybody's like starting to developing applications. So when these data scientists, machine learning engineers, AI engineers, when they have their own applications ready, I believe this open architecture would be quite important for them to do their deployment, and how fast we can bring any of these applications into action. That would be quite important. Thanks a lot, for this conversation. So would like to now move into the area where we wanted to discuss a little bit further about the security perspective. So though the data engineers, architects ourselves, so we find it's very easier to manage, let's say previously we have 20 people to manage a Hadoop cluster or something like that. Now we can have 2-3 MLOps or DevOps engineers to manage it. So from the management perspective, it's becoming quite easier. But at the same time, we might be getting a lot of security and governance issues, right? So I would like to put this question to Dave. And what are the threats you identify while we are operating in these multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments?
Sure, thank you. So let me touch on what you mentioned before about MLOps and DevOps before I talk about the threats. So with properly implemented MLOps and DevOps, you can actually have a significantly more secure environment. And the reason for that, I'll give you an example, is you can have a fully locked down production environment where a lot of your human administrators don't really have right access into that environment. But then if you control a lot of your releases through the DevOps pipeline that have gone through the proper testing and security and compliance, then you know that that pipeline is going to work right. It's not going to subject you to human error, and you're also going to actually significantly reduce your exposure by having multiple different admins. You can log into the console and make human mistakes and human errors. For example, I've seen human administrators bypass firewalls and set up virtual machines to have public internet access because they're in a rush, all sorts of things like that, right? So a properly managed DevOps environment can actually be more secure.
Yes.
Now on to what I think the biggest risk is in this area. I actually don't think it's the technology. I actually think it's the ethics and inclusion. I think the biggest risk to artificial intelligence moving forward is that AI can be used for good, and there are a lot of excellent use cases out there, everything from climate to sustainability to helping farmers increase their crop yield, to helping people with disabilities get jobs, to making people more productive in declining population regions, etc. But AI can also be used for bad. At Microsoft, we've seen, we get a lot of customers asking us, hey, can you help us with this use case and help us with that use case? Things like, can you speed up the courts process, for example? Well, it's like, what is your data based on? What is your actual historical court case data based on? Are there any biases in that data? Things like, you don't want to wake up one day and find out that your recruitment AI was in the news for not hiring the right people or not being inclusive, for example. So I think the biggest threat in this space is around inclusive, fairness, bias, and weaponization of artificial intelligence. And we all have a responsibility to make sure as we go deeper into this path now into the future, especially long term, that we set up our ethical standards and set up our governance and our fairness so we can make sure that this technology doesn't get used for bad purposes. Thank you.
Yeah. So also, I'm getting back to Geoff again. So this is a huge concern, right? So earlier we have this closed systems where majority of people are not able to log in from outside the organization. Now we actually put in this data into public cloud solutions and services. So it can be open. It can be open based on the way you operate for other people, and that also can consist of some sensitive information of the customers, especially when it comes to companies like telco industry related companies, and it could be e-commerce platforms related to telco as well, right? So can you explain a little bit about what sort of AI governance? So we've been talking 4 or 5 years ago about this data science governance, data governance, and all. Now it has come to the AI governance as well with these AI long range plans. So can you put a couple of thoughts to this, what sort of things we should consider, put some special attention while we are going to have a long range plan for artificial intelligence?
Yeah, look, and I think I want to echo many of the points that Dave brought up. When you look at AI governance, we're now in a position that we can do more with data and AI than we should do. We can ask questions that we don't necessarily deserve the answers for, right? Because they would infringe potentially on the individual's privacy. It would infringe upon areas where we're entitled for, or other organizations not to understand, such as religion, medical conditions, etc. So I think when you look at your long-range plan, the big focus actually shouldn't necessarily be on the technology hybrid or anything. It should be, what are we as an organization setting as our North Star for acceptable conduct? So just like all of us work for companies that have acceptable conduct or guidelines, working for Snowflake, we have our values. I think when it comes to AI, you need to define what your values are. Are your values to maximize economic return? Are your values to run your business in a way that promotes inclusion and diversity? And only until you have these guidelines, in some ways personifying your AI governance strategy to match the model conduct of an employee, can you really start to put some safeguards in place? So that's the first thing. I think you need AI governance. The second thing is you can't always rely on people to do the right thing. And that's just an unfortunate part of life. So underpinning the AI governance, then we start to look at things such as data governance, ensuring that we protect people's privacy and data, and ensure that data scientists, who are naturally incredibly inquisitive people, are always given the right data sets for the right amount of time to do what they need to do. It cannot be simply open slather on your CDR, XDR, geolocation data, right? We need to have a data governance framework. And I think once you've got these two in place, then I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a little bit more practical to deal with the infrastructure governance be it on a multi-cloud environment, on-prem, off-prem, but really start at the top with the AI, back it up and restrict it with data governance, and then finally we can look at some of the infrastructure security policies that we need to put in place to basically back that AI vision.
Yeah, I think like companies like TM Forum and all, they are heavily like investing like time and like working closely with all the operators like vendors and all to like set up this like canvas to make sure we have the right ethics. I think we have another speech also coming soon regarding this, and so how important it is for everyone to understand that AI is coming into the picture to make our life easier. Not to like push out of like our jobs or nothing like that. So AI agent is always there for us to like help to do what we are doing right now in a better way. So that is so while we are doing it, like what sort of like ethics and what sort of governance we should have it in place. So that is quite important. Thank you so much, Geoff, for that insight. Let me give like a small summary of what we have discussed so far. So we have been like discussing about like architectures, like what sort of architectures should be there in like Romain give us like really good insights. Then we talk a little bit about strategy and what sort of like things in place while we are planning, especially planning a long range plan for AI. And also then we discuss about a couple of challenges with different perspectives like data engineering, applications, development, deployment, AI ops and all. Then we were discussing about security concerns, data privacy and governance and stuff. This will be the last question we are going to discuss in this panel discussion. Let's try to discuss a little bit about business aspects of the multi-cloud environments, also hybrid cloud environments. I would like to start with Romain on this. What are the business advantages, impacts expected in the while we are going to deploy and have like long-range plans for artificial intelligence?
Okay, so as I said earlier, actually, so it really goes way beyond just AI, right? And whether you are you're working on legacy applications or modern cloud native apps, the multi-cloud strategy is a must to go, right, for the future. There's no question asked around that. The business impact is basically because of flexibility and choice of service, but also better agility for your data science team. You can bring new service, new products to market faster, right?
Yeah.
Also better economics over time, right? We are getting more and more used to AI. We embed AI into more and more processes. So overall, the TCO will go down as well. So the strategy to go multi-cloud is definitely something that is required for every businesses that are moving through the digital transformation. But as well, we need also to keep a strong eye on data, not just data storage, of course, but data security. Data is the fuel of the digital transformation today, right? That's the key. So data security, privacy, governance is really important. And just to back what the two last speakers just talked about, AI ethics, bias in data. And I would probably push one more topic that needs to be looked at is AI explainability. So ability to explain what your model does, why it behaves that way, are critical when you look at your AI activities. Right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Romain. Would like to put the same question to Neo as well.
Okay. Well, when we look at this, just like I mentioned on multi-cloud, right? It is really a multi-cloud environment. It is, in fact, it's a trend for most of the enterprises, right? All the digital conglomerates or the traditional conglomerate that we engage by Huawei today, in certain way, they are using multiple different cloud environment. And obviously, when you use these multi-clouds, right, there are certain what you call it, advantages. So, for example, you actually help to reduce the business risk and ensure no vendor lock-in. As well as why we choose different cloud, obviously, is because maybe you see certain services that make economical sense, lower cost, and that's why you actually deploy there. And when you have multi-cloud environments, it is also more flexible, and also allow you to have this technology diversity. Now, AI, machine learning, these are basically additional function within these multi-cloud platforms, right? So just to cite one example, like, I think AI, when we look at it, is actually it is used to solve specific problems as of it is now. I mean, AI cannot think like a human thinking today, right? So AI specific function, like one example, we use some of this old Huawei phone, right? Mount into the forest, right, to listen to the forest and use that as a way to help us to protect the forest from, able to analyze the gunfire sound, truck sound, all this will help us to better protect and enforce, for some of the endangered species. So this is just one use of the AI, in that. Now, in terms of the impacts, right, two key impacts for deploying multi-cloud environment. So first one would be like, once you have multi-cloud, some of the issue about how to manage, what effort needed to do the integration, to create a single view that you need to manage your operation, and more issue to resolve, right? And of course, when you have more party means more finger pointing, and these are all the issues that you need to handle, right? Second key impact is really on the areas of manpower, right? Of course, when you have more platforms, you need to have more expertise, more skill sets. It means a bigger technical team and also more overheads, and also security implementation can be more complex, right? So these are my input. Thanks.
Thank you, Neo. Thank you so much. Dave, would you like to a little bit add and a couple of thoughts onto that?
Sure, I had a couple of thoughts. So I think there's a lot of value in hybrid cloud, for sure. So the way that Microsoft looks at cloud these days is really, it's us and you. So we just want to be an extension of your cloud and bring our technology to make it easier for you to manage, whether that's through the inference process, being able to deploy models back on-prem that have low latency requirements. So I think there's a lot of value in hybrid. When it comes to multi-cloud, I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here. I think, there's pros and cons, right? So the pros have been mentioned. I will say that in my experience, not all cloud providers are equal and do not bring the same capability. So from a pros perspective, having a multi-cloud environment means that you can leverage services that one of the other vendors may not provide, for example. And one of the good things about AI is that it's quite portable. It's typically containers-based. There's not a lot of lock-in, depending on the services you use, of course, and the SDKs you use, but it's fairly portable. So that's a bonus. However, like I said, to really go in to this and become a cognitive organization, there's more to it than just using AI in the cloud. There's all of the other different components that you're going to want to use, from governance, security, landing zones, all sorts of things like that. Where is your data, for example? Most cloud providers have egress cost. So the way that I would approach it is more having one primary cloud and then maybe another one that is your backup, instead of spreading your resources and spreading your cost and spreading your effort and spreading your data across multiple different clouds. Thank you.
Yeah, in that case, probably we should be able to leverage and increase what our expected returns on this investment. These are going to be huge investments, right? So for example, so there may be one cloud provider who's really strong in providing serverless solutions and services, but at the same time, there might be another cloud service provider maybe having different products which will be more optimized to do ML ops, AI ops sort of things, right? So in that case, so a combination of these would definitely add a lot of values as well. So also let me get to Geoff. Even Snowflake is quite strong in data warehousing and all. So operating in specifically hybrid environment would be quite important for a company or organization who are currently in the process of migrating from on-prem to a cloud, right? So they will definitely have to go with a hybrid cloud environment for some time. So can you discuss a little bit about what would be the business advantages of this?
Yeah, look, I think Axiata is in a really, or the Axiata group is in a really unique position, right? Because you operate in many countries and economies that are still emerging. So any incremental difference, increased access to internet, increased access to smartphones, increased access to micro lending can make a massive difference. The one thing that I'll say is please double down on AI, ML, cloud, public cloud or hybrid cloud technologies, because it's actually going to decrease your unit cost of doing business. There's no amount of people that you can hire that can help you come up with, credit checks for 100 million people that operate, across all your markets. If you start to double down on AI, ML, and you can start to decrease the time and the cost of doing these, I think it's really fascinating what, all the data scientists at Axiata and across all your opcos can potentially do to, uplift the value that you deliver back. Specifically in relation to Snowflake, a large part of that is really helping people understand that they can move away from fixed costs to a consumption service. And that's probably the thing that people don't really understand as much about Snowflake. We're a consumption service, so you only pay for what you use. And that's really, really critical when you're trying to reach a really massive customer base or potential customer base at a very low cost.
All right. Thanks a lot. So a lot of thoughts, like a lot of things we discuss during this panel discussion. We discuss about technical stuff, like what should be like basically should be considered while a company or like specifically like a technology strategy or like business strategy unit should be look into while they are like preparing for this like transformation, Industrial Revolution 4.0 and artificial intelligence and everything coming into place, and what sort of things they should be considering, and what are the key things they should be keeping in their mind. I would like to thank Romain, Dave, Geoff, Neo, all of you. Thank you for being with us for this panel discussion. It was a really good session and insightful. Thanks a lot.